All right, so Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams are finally back home, huh?
Yeah, after a pretty long mission, right? 9 months on the ISS.
I saw some footage of them getting out of that SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely didn't look easy.
I bet. It must be a wild ride coming back to Earth after floating around up there for so long.
That's what we really want to explore today. It
Yep.
must be a challenge just getting used to gravity again.
For sure.
But I'm really curious about something else. The mental shift. The whole change in perspective.
Yeah, you're talking about the overview effect, right?
Exactly. Like you hear astronauts talk about this profound change in how they see everything.
Oh, absolutely. Like, think about Yuri Gagarin, the first human in space.
Right.
Or Sally Ride, our first American woman in space.
Yeah. And even more recently, Helen Sharman, the first British astronaut.
It's amazing how they all describe this fundamental shift in their worldview after experiencing space travel.
Okay, so this overview effect, it's a pretty cool term, actually. It was
Mhm.
coined back in the late 80s, but it sounds like astronauts have been feeling this way since the very beginning.
Oh, yeah. Definitely since the dawn of spaceflight.
So what we're hoping to do today is really delve into this phenomenon. We want to look at the experiences of astronauts like Dr. Helen Sharman and Robert Thirsk. They've both talked pretty extensively about this.
Okay.
What we want to understand is how coming back to Earth changes their lives in these really unexpected ways, beyond just the physical stuff.
Well, let's start with Dr. Helen Sharman then. She went on this 8-day mission back in 1991.
Okay.
It was the Soyuz TN-12 mission, and she became the first British astronaut to go to space.
Wow.
Now, even though it was a relatively short trip compared to some, it seems like those 8 days completely reset her view on life, especially what she calls home life.
That's so interesting. It's like seeing Earth from that perspective changes your whole understanding of what's truly important. And you hear Dr. Sharman talk about how all those material possessions, the things we all get caught up in down here, they just faded away in her mind while she was up there.
Yeah, it really puts things into perspective, doesn't it?
Totally. Instead, she said she found herself thinking constantly about her family, her friends, her colleagues.
The people she was leaving behind.
Yeah, it's almost like she could visualize them down on the planet while she was orbiting above. Must have been such a powerful feeling.
I can only imagine. And that kind of perspective shift probably stays with you long after you come back down to Earth.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just about those personal connections for Dr. Sharman. She also talks about how fragile Earth looked against the backdrop of space.
Oh, yeah. That's a common theme among astronauts.
It's like that delicate blue marble hanging in the vast emptiness of the cosmos. It really hits home how vulnerable we are. And she also brought up something else, the interconnectedness of everything on Earth.
Oh, yeah.
Down here, we tend to focus on our own little bubbles. But from up there, she saw how everything is linked.
Right.
You know, like plankton in the ocean, currents creating oxygen,
Mm.
or a lightning strike in one place, influencing weather patterns miles away.
Wow.
Even rivers flowing across borders, ignoring those lines we've drawn on maps.
That's a really powerful image.
Yeah, it's like Earth is this one giant living, breathing organism, and we're all just tiny parts of it.
It really emphasizes that interconnectedness.
Totally.
Yeah.
Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about Robert Thirsk, a Canadian astronaut.
Okay.
He actually had 2 space flights, one in 1996 and another in 2009.
Wow. So he's experienced this overview effect twice.
Exactly. And it's interesting because he talks about a lot of the same things as Dr. Sharman, this fundamental shift in his values, his
Yeah.
priorities.
Okay.
He specifically mentioned a decreased interest in local politics after being in space.
Really?
It's like seeing Earth as this whole unified planet makes those smaller issues seem less significant. Like, it's hard to get worked up about a local zoning dispute when you've seen the curvature of the Earth from space.
That's quite a change in perspective.
It is. And his wife actually said something really insightful.
What's that?
She said that his head is still in space.
Oh, wow.
And he agrees. He says those experiences had such a profound impact on him that it's like a part of him never really came back down.
That's pretty amazing.
It is. It shows you how powerful this overview effect can be.
Yeah. It's not just a temporary feeling. It really reshapes your whole worldview.
And Thirsk also brings up something really important for us to consider. The potential for alienation after coming back to Earth. Because the experience of space travel is so unique, so intense. It can be really tough for astronauts to relate to people who haven't been through it.
Like they're in this exclusive club.
Kind of.
Yeah.
And it's not intentional, but it can create this distance with family and friends.
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to describe this life-changing experience.
No one quite gets it.
Exactly. And it's not just family and friends either. Thirsk talks about this feeling of shared understanding with other astronauts.
It's like they have this unspoken bond.
Yeah. They've all seen Earth from that same incredible vantage point.
Hmm.
And it connects them in a way that's hard to explain.
That makes a lot of sense.
And just like Dr. Sharman Thirsk also emphasizes this deep concern for the planet after his space flights. He talks about how seeing Earth from space ignited this sense of responsibility in him.
Really?
Like he wants to protect it, preserve it for future generations.
That's a common thread among astronauts, isn't it? This profound care for our planet.
It really is. Now, of course, we can't talk about returning from space without addressing the physical challenges.
Yeah.
Like, you probably saw those images of Wilmore and Williams being helped onto stretchers after their capsule landed.
Oh, yeah. They didn't look too steady on their feet.
And that's because spending months in microgravity has some pretty serious effects on the body.
Like what kind of effects?
Well, for one thing, fluids shift around without the pull of gravity. So when they come back to Earth, it takes a while for everything to settle back into place.
I see.
And that can cause all sorts of problems, like muscle weakness. That's why you sometimes hear astronauts talk about having chicken legs.
Oh, wow.
They can also have vision problems because the pressure inside their heads changes in space.
That's pretty wild. It's like their bodies have adapted to a whole different reality.
Exactly. And even while they're up on the ISS, you can see the physical toll it takes.
How so?
Well, astronauts often lose weight, and their faces can look a bit gaunt.
Oh.
And when they land, they go through these super intensive medical checks at NASA's Johnson Space Center. The doctors monitor everything super closely.
That makes sense.
They have to make sure the astronauts are recovering properly.
So what happens after that?
Well, NASA has this specialized 45-day rehabilitation program.
Oh, wow.
Each astronaut spends about 2 hours every day doing exercises tailored to their specific needs. But it's necessary to help them regain their strength and adjust back to Earth's gravity.
So it's a gradual process.
It is. It takes time for their bodies to fully readapt. Pretty amazing when you think about it. The human body is so adaptable.
Yeah, it can function in these incredibly different environments.
But it's interesting to contrast this very physical reentry process
with the more mental and emotional reentry.
Yeah, like the overview effect we've been talking about.
Yeah.
It's not something you could just fix with exercise.
It's a different kind of journey.
Exactly. It's more internal, more about processing those profound experiences and figuring out how to integrate them into your life back on Earth.
That's a good point. And Dr. Sharman actually talked about how NASA has this very controlled and gentle process for helping astronauts readjust.
Really?
Yeah, they start with medical examinations and debriefings about the mission.
Okay.
They slowly reintroduce them to their families and friends.
I see.
And of course, there's the monitored exercise program.
It's like they're easing them back into everyday life.
Exactly. They're giving them the time and space to process everything they've been through.
That makes a lot of sense. But as Dr. Sharman pointed out, even with this gradual reintegration,
the memories of those incredible views from orbit never fade.
Yeah. Like that experience stays with them forever.
It becomes a part of who they are.
And that controlled physical reintegration really highlights the difference between recovering from the physical effects of space travel
and navigating the psychological and philosophical impact of the overview effect.
Yeah, like there's no set program for readjusting your entire worldview.
It's a much more personal and ongoing process.
Right. It's about figuring out what those experiences mean to you and how they change your perspective on life. So when you really think about it, the overview effect is this incredibly profound and lasting shift in how astronauts see the world.
Definitely.
It goes way beyond just seeing Earth from space.
It reshapes their priorities, their values, their whole understanding of our place in the universe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder about the long-term impact.
On the astronauts themselves, but also on humanity as a whole.
Yeah. Like maybe these insights can help us all appreciate our planet a little more.
And maybe understand our interconnectedness a little better.
And that brings us to our final thought for you today. We've been talking about this dramatic change in perspective that astronauts experience.
This overview effect.
Right. But what if you could somehow achieve a similar shift in viewpoint without actually going to space?
That's an interesting thought.
Like, what would you see differently in your everyday life?
What would I value more?
Exactly. Would you focus on different things? Make different choices? And maybe reflecting on the interconnectedness of life on Earth, something so vivid from orbit, is a good place to start.
Yeah. Like we're all part of this incredible system.
And maybe if we could all tap into that perspective a little more.
We might make some better decisions for ourselves and for our planet.
For sure.
Yeah.
So think about that today. What can you do to shift your viewpoint and see the world with fresh eyes?
It's a challenge, but it's a worthwhile one.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
See ya.
See you next time.